My wife cheated on me and ended up pregnant by her lover. I didn't seek revenge, but fate had its own plans. Once he found out she was pregnant, her lover did following. In the heart of a bustling city, nestled in a quaint, tree-lined street, stood a charming two-story house. It was the kind of house that whispered tales of love and warmth. This was the home of Xavier and Colini, a couple often envied for their seemingly perfect life. On the surface, they were the embodiment of marital bliss, but beneath the veneer of happiness lay an invisible crack, widening with each passing day. Colini, with her infectious laugh and sparkling eyes, was the life of their frequent dinner parties. This evening was no different. As she moved gracefully around the room, her laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, creating a symphony of mirth. Xavier, her husband, was the quieter counterpart. Tall and handsome, with a thoughtful expression that seldom left his face, he was the pillar that everyone leaned on. Yet, tonight, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. As the evening wore on, the guests departed, leaving behind a trail of compliments and well-wishes. Colini leaned against the door, waving the last couple goodbye, her smile finally fading as the door closed. The silence that followed was loud, a stark contrast to the evening's liveliness. Xavier, who had retreated to his study, was engrossed in his work, the soft glow of the computer screen illuminating his focused face. Colini watched him from the doorway, a familiar pang of loneliness clutching at her heart. She yearned for the days when they would talk late into the night, lost in each other's company. But those days seemed like a distant memory, replaced by Xavier's ever-growing commitment to his career. The following morning, Colini found herself in the cozy embrace of Café de Flore, her favorite coffee shop. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the pages of her beloved novels. As she sipped her coffee, lost in thought, a voice interrupted her reverie. "Is this seat taken?" She looked up to find Parker standing beside her table, his charming smile in place. Parker was a regular at the cafe, known for his charismatic personality and quick wit. Colini had always found him intriguing but had kept her distance. "Please, have a seat," she said, her voice tinged with a politeness that concealed her curiosity. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, as if they had known each other for years. Parker had a way of listening that made Colini feel truly heard, something she had been missing dearly. They talked about everything, from literature to the little quirks of life. Colini found herself laughing genuinely, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. As the cafe began to empty, they both reluctantly stood up to leave. Outside, the city was bathed in the golden hues of the afternoon sun. "It was lovely talking to you, Colini," Parker said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "The pleasure was all mine," Colini replied, her heart fluttering in a way it hadn't for a long time. That night, as she lay beside Xavier, who was already lost in sleep, Colini couldn't help but think of Parker. She felt a twinge of guilt for the flicker of excitement she felt, but it was quickly overshadowed by a longing for something she couldn't quite name. In the quiet of the night, the unseen crack in her marriage widened a little more, a silent testament to the growing distance between her and Xavier. Unbeknownst to her, this was the beginning of a journey that would change the course of her life forever. As autumn arrived, painting the city in shades of amber and gold, Colini found herself increasingly drawn to the enigmatic Parker. Their chance encounters at the cafe evolved into deliberate meetings, as if guided by an unseen force. With each conversation, a connection deepened, filling the void that had quietly nestled in Colini's heart. Xavier, meanwhile, remained ensconced in his work, his presence at home more like a whisper than a statement. His brief appearances were marked by distracted greetings and absent-minded kisses, leaving Colini to dine alone most nights, her only companion the soft hum of the city. One chilly evening, Colini and Parker found themselves walking along the riverbank, the city lights reflecting in the water like scattered jewels. Their conversation flowed as freely as the river beside them, touching on dreams unspoken and desires unfulfilled. It was during these moments that Colini felt an exhilarating sense of freedom, a stark contrast to her life with Xavier, which now felt like a well-rehearsed play. Parker stopped, turning to face her. His eyes, usually sparkling with humor, held a different emotion now, something deeper, more intense. "Colini," he began, his voice low, "I can't pretend anymore. I'm drawn to you in a way I can't explain." Colini's heart raced. She had felt it too, the undeniable pull towards Parker, but hearing him voice it made it real, undeniable. She wanted to protest, to uphold the vow she had made to Xavier, but the words refused to form. Instead, she found herself leaning in, caught in the gravity of the moment. Their kiss was a spark that ignited a hidden flame, a flame that burned with a passion Collini had long forgotten. In Parker's embrace, she rediscovered parts of herself that she had buried under the roles of wife and hostess. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. Collini was torn between guilt and exhilaration, each secret meeting with Parker a bittersweet reminder of the love she was betraying. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to stop, the connection with Parker feeding a part of her soul that had been starved for too long. Xavier remained oblivious to the change in Collini. His life was a carousel of meetings and business trips, his mind preoccupied with the next big deal. Collini watched him from across the room on rare evenings when he was home, her heart aching with a mixture of love and sorrow. It was late November when Collini's world came to a sudden, jarring halt. The realization dawned on her one morning, the symptoms she had been ignoring coalescing into a single, terrifying truth. She was pregnant. The pregnancy test confirmed her fears, the two pink lines like a verdict to her indiscretions. Panic and confusion swirled within her. This child, a symbol of her affair with Parker, threatened to shatter the fragile facade of her life with Xavier. Collini knew she couldn't hide the truth for long. The weight of her secret was suffocating, and she found herself at a crossroads. Telling Xavier would mean the end of their marriage, a life built together crumbling into dust. Yet, keeping it from him was an act of deception she wasn't sure she could live with. As she sat alone in the silence of her home, the walls echoing with the ghosts of laughter and love, Collini realized the magnitude of the path she had chosen. A path that led to a place where happiness was as fleeting as the autumn leaves, soon to be swept away by the unforgiving winds of consequence. The winter chill had settled over the city, its icy fingers creeping through the streets and into the homes of its inhabitants. For Collini, the cold was more than just a seasonal change, it was a reflection of the turmoil raging within her. In the privacy of her room, the positive pregnancy test lay on the bedside table, a stark reminder of the tangled web of lies and passion she had woven. The reality of her situation was overwhelming. Carrying Parker's child meant the end of her life as she knew it. Her mind was a battleground, torn between fear of losing everything and the guilt of her betrayal. Parker, when confronted with the news, reacted with shock and disbelief. "I can't be a father, Collini," he stammered, his eyes avoiding hers. This changes everything." His words were a cold slap of reality, shattering any illusions she had harbored about their relationship. Parker, who had been her escape, her breath of fresh air, was now the source of her deepest pain. With a heavy heart, Collini knew there was only one thing left to do. She had to confess to Xavier. The thought of hurting him was excruciating, but the burden of her secret was too much to bear alone. Xavier was in his study when she found the courage to approach him. The room, usually a sanctuary of quiet concentration, felt oppressively silent as she entered. Xavier looked up, his face softening as he saw her. "Collini, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etching his features. The words tumbled out of her in a rush, a chaotic mixture of apologies and truths. "I'm pregnant, Xavier, but it's not yours." The air seemed to freeze between them, the ticking of the clock on the wall now unbearably loud. Xavier's face drained of color, his expression one of utter disbelief. "How could you?" he whispered, the pain in his voice cutting through her like a knife. "I trusted you, Collini. I loved you." The conversation that followed was a blur of tears, accusations, and broken promises. Collini's confession laid bare the fractures in their marriage, exposing years of unspoken grievances and neglected needs. Xavier, once the pillar of strength, now seemed broken, his world crumbling around him. In the days that followed, the house became a mausoleum of their former life. Conversations were reduced to curt exchanges, the air heavy with unspoken resentment and grief. Collini's pregnancy became the elephant in the room, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had torn their marriage apart. Xavier, unable to bear the sight of her, moved into the guest room, and soon after, filed for divorce. The legal proceedings were cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the love that had once bound them. Collini watched as the life they had built together was dissected and divided, her heart breaking with each signed document. In the end, she was left alone in the house, surrounded by memories of a happier time. The future loomed before her, dark and uncertain. As she caressed her growing belly, Collini realized the enormity of her actions. She had sought solace in another's arms, only to find herself trapped in a labyrinth of her own making. The finality of the divorce marked the end of an era. Xavier, the man she had once vowed to spend her life with, was now a stranger, bound to her only by the echoes of a love that had once been. In her quest for happiness, Collini had lost everything, and as the winter snow began to fall, blanketing the city in white, she couldn't help but wonder if the warmth of love would ever touch her heart again. The stark, leafless trees stood as silent witnesses to the somber mood that had engulfed Collini's world. The once vibrant hues of her life had faded into a monochrome palette of despair and regret. The divorce had left her adrift, a ship lost in a turbulent sea of uncertainty and pain. Parker, who had once been a beacon of excitement and passion, had become a distant memory, an echo of a choice that cost her everything. His departure upon learning of her pregnancy had been swift and final, leaving her to face the consequences alone. The man she had risked her marriage for had vanished, leaving her with nothing but the life growing inside her. Collini's days were now a blend of solitude and introspection. The echoes of Xavier's footsteps had long faded from the halls of their home, leaving behind an oppressive silence. She wandered through the rooms, each corner a reminder of a past filled with laughter and love, now replaced by the cold reality of her actions. Her pregnancy, once a source of guilt, had become her only solace. As the baby grew within her, so did a sense of maternal determination. Despite the circumstances of its conception, she felt a fierce love for the unborn child, a love that provided a glimmer of light in her otherwise darkened world. However, the outside world was not as forgiving. Collini's attempts to find employment were met with closed doors and whispered judgments. Her friends, once a tight-knit circle of support, had dwindled to mere acquaintances, their interactions tinged with awkwardness and pity. As the due date approached, the reality of single motherhood loomed large. Financial pressures mounted, with legal fees and living expenses consuming her dwindling savings. The once cherished home felt too large, too empty, its walls echoing with the ghost of her former life. The labor was long and arduous, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil she had endured. When her daughter was finally placed in her arms, Collini's heart swelled with an overwhelming mix of joy and fear. She looked into the baby's eyes, seeing a piece of herself, a symbol of both her greatest mistake and her greatest love. Yet, even in motherhood, Collini found little respite. The sleepless nights and relentless demands of caring for a newborn were compounded by her isolation. She longed for Xavier's support, for the shared joy of parenthood they were supposed to have. But he was gone, his parting words still echoing in her mind, a reminder of the chasm between what was and what could have been. The divorce, once a painful prospect, was now a stark reality. Xavier had moved on, his life a separate entity from hers. Their occasional communications were brief and functional, limited to necessary discussions about financial settlements. The finality of their separation was a wound that refused to heal. In the quiet moments, as she rocked her daughter to sleep, Collini's mind often wandered to the choices she had made. The affair with Parker, a fleeting escape from her unfulfilled life with Xavier, had seemed like a path to happiness. But it had led her here, to a life of struggle and remorse. As the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, blanketing the world in a pristine layer of white, Collini gazed out of the window. The world outside was changing, moving on with the relentless passage of time. But for her, time seemed to stand still, a constant reminder of the life she once had and the price she paid for a moment of indiscretion. Winter had deepened, its icy grip turning the bustling city into a quiet, introspective landscape. Inside her now too spacious house, Collini cradled her infant daughter, the only source of warmth in her otherwise cold existence. The baby, with her innocent eyes, was unaware of the storm of emotions that surrounded her birth and the upheaval that followed. Collini's days and nights blended into a relentless cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing her daughter, with little time for self-reflection. Yet, in the rare moments of quiet, when her daughter slept peacefully, Collini's thoughts drifted to the life she once led. The memories of her time with Xavier, once vivid and joyful, now seemed like fragments of a dream she could no longer fully grasp. The reality of her situation was stark. Her divorce from Xavier was complete, the final papers signed with a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The man she had once envisioned growing old with was now a distant figure, their interactions limited to terse emails and brief, impersonal phone calls regarding financial support. Collini's attempts to re-enter the workforce had been met with sympathetic smiles and polite rejections. The stigma of her past actions, coupled with her new responsibilities as a single mother, made her prospects dim. Friends, once a constant in her life, had drifted away, uncomfortable with the complexity of her situation. Her social circle had shrunk to the walls of her home, leaving her feeling isolated and disconnected. Financial pressures mounted as she struggled to make ends meet. The once cherished items of luxury and comfort in her home now seemed frivolous, reminders of a life of excess she could no longer afford. Selling her jewelry and some of her belongings became a necessary measure to ensure stability for her and her daughter. Despite the hardships, Collini's love for her daughter was unwavering. She found joy in the little moments, a smile, a giggle, a new milestone reached. But these moments of happiness were often overshadowed by a deep-seated guilt and regret for the circumstances she had brought upon them. Her daughter's first winter was a quiet affair, far removed from the grand celebrations Collini had once enjoyed. The festive lights and decorations around the city seemed to mock her current plight, a stark contrast to the festive gatherings she had once hosted with Xavier. As she gazed at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms, Collini couldn't help but wonder about the future. How would she explain the absence of her father? How would she navigate the challenges of single parenthood while grappling with the shadows of her past? The weight of her choices lay heavy on her shoulders, a constant reminder of the fleeting moments of happiness that had led to her current reality. The affair with Parker, a misguided attempt to find what she thought was missing in her marriage, had resulted in the loss of everything she held dear. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the city in a blanket of white. It was a scene of serene beauty, a stark contrast to the turmoil within Collini's heart. As the year drew to a close, she realized that the coming of spring would bring new challenges and uncertainties. But for now, she held her daughter close, finding solace in her presence. In her eyes, Collini saw a glimmer of hope, a reminder that life, with all its unpredictability and hardship, also held the possibility of new beginnings. Yet, the echoes of regret remained, a silent testament to the choices that had irrevocably altered the course of her life.